Okay, let's talk about feedback loops. As many of the talks will be highly technical, up to the point, and also very practical, I decided to use the opportunity to maybe wander around a bit and explore the feedback loops that we are encountering in our lives, and also a bit in the nature around us. So let's get started. I have these 3 chapters in my talk. First one is just a super quick rundown through the feedback loops that we are experiencing. We are experiencing many of them on the daily level, but these ones are, let's say, easy to identify and follow some of the stages in our, private and professional lives. Then I'm going to dive a little bit into, how nature does it and some interesting concepts that are worth looking into. And finally, I'm going to run through the evolution of our company, team, the product, and tie that again, hopefully, into the whole story around feedback loops and how they are critical and, of course, super important. So let's get started. So from broken nose to green build. So I'm going to run through from childhood to your first green build, let's say. This is one of the situations that is, very familiar to all of us through personal experiences, seeing people around us. One of the very interesting aspects of this feedback loop that it's very fast. So the moment you make mistake, you are rewarded or punished for it. And then you have to analyze, okay, what did I do? Why the results were such? And then you go on and improve, and you fall again and make the same mistakes and so on. But that's how all of us just get started. A second phase is definitely school. So on weekly basis, you are being, rewarded with your marks for the things that you did in a good or not so good way. And it's definitely something which is, preparing you for life in many different aspects. And here you are seeing that there are, many disciplines and many different areas. In some you're going to excel, in some others not that much. But then it ties together into a meaningful story. Moving from there, okay, skipping a slide here. So this is something that I use to represent our professional life, and it's also critical to our discipline and what we are doing. So companies are, in the arena fighting, and for the things that they are doing good or not so good, again, they are being, rewarded with, money and profit, success, great brand, or it's potentially going in the other direction. And it's actually all the time going in all directions, depending on, how complex your domain are and what kind of market you are addressing. But our job as developers and people in the tech is usually kind of tucked into that broader business goal. And business leaders, product leaders are validating their strategies, their moves on the market. And to do that, they need our support. So they need us to build the software and the systems that will be used in a particular area, in a particular domain, to validate those assumptions. And that leads us to, the core, which is might look super simple compared to these other ones, but also has so many different elements of it. So if we are now this laser focused on our discipline, so we are producing code, pushing it, tests are being run, and we are getting the feedback. Are our tests green or red, and if we can move forward. But as you will see later on, there are also many interesting aspects to this. And we are not alone. Very, very few situations you're working on a single app and a single developer, but it's also an ecosystem of different, parts of the application, different services, different teams, and then it all together ends up being kind of an orchestra that should churn out these green builds and at a predictable pace, so our other parts of the system can rely on us. We have seen how we do it in our developer lives and what are some of the milestones where we are experiencing different kinds of feedback loops. But let's now see how nature does it. I always find it interesting when I'm stuck in our domain for a long period of time. Very inspiring to see how other disciplines are doing it. So could it be like a construction or medicine or trade, any other areas. It's very inspiring to me, and definitely nature is one of the things where when I personally see that something is being conducted in a certain way for millions of years, and I can find analogy how to apply it in our in our small day-to-day challenges, I definitely take it as something that definitely works and we can rely on. So let's dive in. For this part, I have found a great talk by Ted recorded maybe 9 or 10 years ago. It's called Feedback Loops, How Nature Gets Its Rhythm. You can find the YouTube link here. So hopefully I'm not going to butcher it too much, but I find it so fascinating, and I think it would tie nicely into the whole story that I wanted to share it with you in my words. So the first example that they use is you have a piece of soil which is without any vegetation, and then something starts growing. And this is their example of a positive feedback loop. And we will see there are positive and negative feedback loops that work together and are essential. In this situation, what they are going through is that you have, let's say, this plant. It reaches the end of its life. It returns to the soil and it fertilizes it. So in this situation, the death actually has a positive effect on that soil. And then a seed comes in, and then there are more nutrients that are available, and then you will see this loop just continues and amplifies. Moving on, again, additive effects, and what ultimately we get is this growth of the biomass on that piece of land, and we are focusing here just on this positive feedback loop. There are also many other negative that are happening and are intertwined, which is the reality of life, of course. But for the sake of this example, we have focused only on the positive feedback loops. And just to mention, what are some of the negatives here? Well, you could have a storm that can, have more or less negative effects on this piece of land. You can have birds eating some of the flowers, insects, and so on, and it all balances out. We will see later. Completely negative feedback loop is this one, where we come in and we just cut all the trees from a piece of land. What happens? Erosion kicks in, nutrients are getting washed away, and then in some cases, again, we need decades, in some cases hundreds of years for that positive feedback loop to establish itself. Here again, we have focused only on the negative one. And let's see how these play in the nature together to bring a system into the balance and rhythm. So this is a screenshot I took for a book that I had a hard time finding later. So it's talking about a piece of data that is available for a period of 19 years, somewhere in Canadian Rookies. It seems like on a relatively small piece of land, someone was very diligently tracking the population size of lynx and rabbits. And what you can see is that as the population of rabbits grew, population of lynx followed. And as the population of rabbits collapsed by being overhunted by lynx, the population drawed back. And it's obvious here that there is a pattern from this chart, but I'm going to move to the next one, where it's even more obvious where they did that modeling. Again, we have this first curve to say it's a blue one connected with these rabbits, and what we see is that shifted is the line which is representing the population of lynxes, which is following this trend. And what is being established here is equilibrium, which means that two systems are in balance on a certain piece of land, and a certain portion of the nature is a system. This is again a great representation that it's not as simple. It's actually very, very complex. There are many plants, many animals, and it all composing a system that is tied together through feedback loops. And as we have learned in school and observed also in our lifetimes, we sometimes tend to, bring some order into this system, and what we end up doing is actually make a huge imbalance, where then it's again solved by nature, but it takes a lot of time. And something that I found really fascinating are these examples of two different ecosystems. So this first one is the desert, and some you can see some animals that are and plants that are managing to survive in this ecosystem, and you can see these lines in the background, which actually don't have really steep peaks in their amplitudes, and that means that this system is in equilibrium, but changes are happening quite slowly. And generally, the whole cycle of life of all of these individual plants or animals is very, very slow. On the other hand, if we take the example of a rainforest, and let's focus on those amplitudes in the background, the way that life is conducted in this ecosystem is vastly different. And I wanted to connect these two examples to something that we have for sure observed. For some of you that have worked in two companies, one could be a huge one, maybe also a part of a government or a really large system. What you have probably observed there, that changes are happening much slower. They take many parts of the system to agree so the changes can happen. And on the other hand, you can take an example of, a typical one would be, a startup where you have a very dynamic environment where things are changing quickly, feedback loops are getting established. They're having some effects, then they're being torn down. Some other ones are being again set up. And those can be tied to your product as a whole, your market strategy, or a particular feature, or even just a piece of your system and your code base, which is going through a certain life cycle. And in chapter 3, I want to talk about our beginnings and evolution of our product and features that tie in to the broader story of feedback loops and the whole rhythm of the organization. So very briefly, how did we started? Well, it started somewhere around like 2009, and we relatively quickly grew to a team of around 6 people. For those of you who were in the industry at that time, that was kind of the golden age of SaaS startups, and a lot of software that was previously available as just a software product on its own that you install, maintain, and so on, was moving into the realm of like services that are offered and maintained by companies for you. We had a number of clients. All of them were very, very lean startups that had a couple of engineers at most, plus designer, plus a product person who was usually also the CEO. And things were moving quickly, especially because there was a lot of opportunity in the market. And that especially pushed us to be extremely efficient and effective with what we were doing. So things that we were producing had to just work. And we couldn't, have long feedback loops of, okay, testing, returning back to the developers, and then having that slow loop. Quality has to be obviously very, very high. And as soon as we discovered a practice such as TDD, BDD, we embraced them straight ahead because we saw a lot of value in the quality that those practices were bringing, and also in those efficiency loops. And as we were embracing those practices, we needed tools to support that. And kind of de facto tool back then was Jenkins. And, the beginning with Jenkins is just amazing. You kind of drag and drop it to a Dropbox, to your desktop. It's single executable. You double click on it, you get it, and it's running. And you have that, initial, okay, this is going to be easy. And everything from that point on is downhill. And many of you have probably experienced that. And we as a team just didn't have the budget for that overhead. There was no understanding also from the client side. Okay, what are you doing for the third day in a row? The code is not moving on our app as fast as we would like that to be. Well, we are babysitting Jenkins. And it was immediately clear to us that there are probably many other people in the world either doing consulting work as we were doing, or being part of the companies that were racing to win on the market, that would also need these kind of low maintenance, no overhead kind of tool that would support them with their practices. And that's why we created Semaphore. So the first line of code was written in 2011, and we launched it in 2012. So a super brief overview of how we got started. And these parameters that I explained, with being very efficient and effective with what we are doing, stayed with us along the way. So how do we approach our product and helping our customers? Well, we want to be and as invisible as possible. You come to us when you really have to, and that is when you have a red build and you need to fix it. When everything is fine, you just don't have to know about Semaphore and the tool which is supporting your CI and CD process. And the other very important aspect that we got much deeper into in the last couple of years is to help teams and companies maintain the speed of that feedback loop, or to make it faster and more efficient. Couple of examples of this. So in practice, what you want is to know what exactly failed. And we have this task collector feature within the application, where we extract for you the very task that has failed. And you need to focus only on that. You don't care if there are like 70 other jobs with a lot of logs as part of your pipeline that are green. From there, other super important aspect is to remove that flakiness that exists in almost every application in the world. And we have seen that a lot of teams are suffering from it. So we have flaky test in alpha stage. This is for one of our applications. As you can see, we are tracking when the new flaky tests have been introduced. We are also tracking the disruption that those flaky tests caused. And there are like many other details here, but that is another element where we are supporting our customers to be as efficient as possible with their feedback loops. And the second component that I mentioned is maintaining that pace. And maintaining that pace seems to be particularly hard once engineering organization gets over that size of like 10, 20 people. We are all kind of working together to a team of like 50, 100 or more engineers. And that's the element where things can get really messy. And we have to provide them with the tools to be able to be to achieve their absolutely best performance. So on this level, in terms of just pure speed, this is a single chart from one of our projects where you can see what is the feedback loop for that particular project. And that's super useful. And when you are laser focused and that's your project, that's great for you. But then there is that wider question of like how feedback loops as a set of systems on the level of organizations, going from business, product to all the engineering elements, are working. And here is a feature that we also introduced to help with that. So this is what we now call organization health, where you have a couple of these parameters that you can observe over your whole organization and get a glimpse of how things are working for your team or team of teams as a whole on the level of organization. And lastly, to mention some of the things that we have been working over last year and a half. So insights, which are connecting these test results with the organization health, with flaky tests. That's the realm where we made significant progress, but there is still a lot of work to be done. And in Q4, we plan to be shipping new features in this realm. And huge other area that we have been working on with a couple of our biggest customers. Definitely on-prem for the organizations which need for the compliance, security, and other regulatory requirements to run things on-prem. And then with that came a set of features that needs to support those big and demanding teams, such as role-based access, where vast majority of that functionality has been shipped. Elements of groups and custom roles are something that is coming, and we're planning to ship by the end of the year. What is also available is SAML and Skim, and also Okta with dedicated integration. OpenID Connect is a great way to handle credentials and just established inter-service connections. 24/7 SLAs for the support, and Kubernetes support for our self-hosted agents. So those are some of the things that we are working on. As always, please feel free to share any feedback with us, and I hope that you will enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.